Good evening. Good evening. Good evening and welcome. It's rare that we fill Piper Auditorium like this. It's a good sign. I'm Gary Hilderbrand, the Peter Lewis Hornbeck Professor in Practice at GSD, and it's also my privilege to be the current chair of the Faculty of Landscape Architecture. I'll begin by acknowledging that the Harvard Graduate School of Design is located on the traditional and ancestral land of the Massachusetts, the original inhabitants of what is now known as Boston and Cambridge. We pay respect to the people of the Massachusetts tribe, past, present, and future, and we honor the land itself, which remains sacred to them. The school also recognizes the work of the Harvard University Native American program in cultivating the relationships that led to the creation of this acknowledgement. A quick reminder, we have live captioning available tonight for our quite large virtual audience. To enable the captions, please click the closed captioning icon at the bottom of the live stream window. And for our in-person audience, live captioning is available at the link or the QR code, which you can do from your seat. That's on the screen. Now, while our main event tonight is a talk by the one and only Ned Friedman, whom I'll introduce in a moment, it is also a great honor and privilege to welcome Boston Mayor Wu to our symposium and exhibition opening. Welcome to you, Mayor Wu, and we're grateful to Chief of Staff Tiffany Wu and a big team of people for making this happen tonight, in spite of what we know is a massively pressing schedule, 7 days a week. It's a blessing to have you here. I also want to give a special welcome to our symposium speakers and faculty moderators for tomorrow's event, and to our faculty and students who are passionate and deeply motivated around the work that will be discussed tonight and tomorrow. Got a long list of very sincere thanks that I'm deferring until the morning because we have a fairly packed evening. Tonight's event kicks off what we hope will be a stimulating and probing exploration of a set of topics that are increasingly relevant, let me say urgent, for people and other living things in every corner of the globe. How will we imagine a set of futures for the forest? Will we continue to allow degradation and destruction? At what cost? Can we design and manage and steward healthy forest ecosystems that will help us survive the disaster of the climate crisis? Survival of the forest is not a guarantee. Indeed, as our exhibition demonstrates, the threats are unprecedented and increasing and very real. If we can say that mitigation measures, improved practices, and adaptations in the urban environment will help this picture, we hope they will, a pressing question remains that tests our wills for the causes of justice. Will the benefits of our important work of design and environmental rescue reach everyone? Will our work to secure and expand the continuity of urban forest ecosystems in our cities and in remote lands too, will they help us to save the earth from catastrophe? And will it save us all? I'll lay this out more thoroughly in the morning. I have more time, but here's the rundown for the evening. Ned Friedman will give his love note to forests and trees. You will love it too. Mayor Wu will respond with her own words on Ned's wisdom and on Boston's commitment to a healthy urban forest and equity for all of its communities. And our dear Professor Ed Eigen will lead us with questions. After that, and I know the mayor has to exit quickly after that, Professor Anita Berrizbeitia will give us a preview of the exhibition Forest Futures, which you have seen out in the Drucker Gallery. Then Alask will raise a glass, have some well-earned snacks, and celebrate the amazing exhibition outside. I'll return to Ned. William Friedman, he prefers Ned, is the Arnold Professor of Organismic and Evolutionary Biology at Harvard University and he's the director of Harvard's Arnold Arboretum. I know people in all walks of life who have cultivated deep attachments to plants. Many, if not most, of our faculty, and many, many of our students. My partner, Doug Reed, who taught me so much about cultivating an affinity with plants. Many of my Reed Hilderbrand colleagues, a lot of them are here tonight. My partners and young designers, all alike, and friends across the globe who really are plant fanatics for all the reasons that Ned will describe. With Ned, we're talking next level plant love. Next level. Do you follow his Instagram? You do. Have you heard about his freshman seminar at Harvard? Have you driven in his Cushman around the Arboretum? I have. You have. During his 13 years so far at the helm of the Arboretum, Ned has worked to expand the Arboretum's global impacts through diverse environmental justice initiatives, a focus on ex situ conservation, and the promotion of a vast array of scientific scholarship within the living collections. As an evolutionary biologist, his scholarly studies have really altered century-old views of the earliest phases of the evolution of flowering plants. That's his primary passion. What he calls Darwin's so-called abominable mystery, which he explained to our students in the first-year core yesterday, as being flummoxed by the fact that everything dies. So 2 days in a row, thank you. A couple of years ago, Ned sought my firm's advice in a wide-ranging discussion on how the Arboretum could be a better neighbor to the environmental justice community it sits in. He was passionate about forging greater connections with the community, and we began to talk about what kinds of journeys people take when they make a visit to the Arboretum. What I remember most is this. Ned wants every person, whether they arrive from Logan Airport, scientists, or the western suburbs, big population, or the adjoining neighborhoods who use the Arboretum all the time. He wants them all to comprehend that the collections have a purpose far beyond that of a park or even a regional treasure. He wants them to understand that the collections were curated over more than 150 years, that the trees are, each and every one, part of the historic record, that they are living beings organized and stewarded to accumulate information and contribute to the evolution of the botanical and ecological sciences. In Ned's words, and now I use this a lot, the trees have standing. So we're here tonight because trees have standing in the world. Let's hear more about that. Welcome, Ned.
Well, thank you so much. How an evolutionary biologist ever ended up here tonight is a journey I can't quite comprehend. But what I want to do for the next 30 minutes is talk about what trees can do in a city. And I'm going to use the one example I know best, and that's the Arnold Arboretum. So first I want to start with our origin story. It's actually not well known. Harvard actually acquired the land that the Arboretum sits on in 1842 when a landowner who was a Harvard College graduate left all of the land to Harvard. It did nothing for the next 30 years. But in 1872, another person, actually not a Harvard College graduate, a New Bedford whaling merchant who wanted an arboretum, his trustees, one of whom was in Jamaica Plain, brought the funds to Harvard and partnered it to create the Arnold Arboretum of Harvard University. And in 1873, the first director was appointed, and I will tell you, in year 152, I'm the 8th director of the Arnold Arboretum. So it's a really amazing feeling. But something extraordinary happened under the direction of the first director and his partnership with Olmsted. They decided 10 years after the Arboretum was founded that Harvard would grant the land of the Arboretum to the city of Boston to become part of its emerging park system. This is the single instance in which Harvard has given something of immense value away. And it is the best thing that ever happened. The city then leased the land back, and we have an indenture. We have a 1,000-year lease. It's renewable once, and we do send a check for $1 downtown every year. So that is how it worked. Now, what did Harvard get out of this? Well, Harvard got a very important set of things out of this. The city of Boston actually owns the land and built the hardscape and continues to maintain the hardscape. They do roads, sidewalks, walls, gates, and law enforcement. But everything else, everyone who is on the Arboretum grounds who's taking care of people or plants works for the Arnold Arboretum of Harvard University. But what I like to think is that we are a co-production of Harvard and the city of Boston. It's really unique. I don't know how an evolutionary biology professor got to run a park in Boston. I have no authority over anyone in the city, and it means we have to cooperate. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. You can't make it happen without working together. So just 2 years ago, we celebrated our 150th anniversary. This is the oldest public arboretum in the New World. But what I want to do is tell you this is infancy. These are the dates that the Arboretum should be good for, 1872 to 3882. That's perspective about how we think about the Arnold Arboretum. It's long-term, it's essentially forever. So who are we? I would argue plants, landscape, and people. We're one of Frederick Law Olmsted's greatest designs, worked out on what was essentially really old, played out sheep pasture with very few trees. We're a cherished public park in Boston's Emerald Necklace. If we get our horticulture right, children will do cartwheels. We are Harvard's Museum of Trees, a living collection of objects to be studied, to be enamored with, everything. We're a research institution studying everything from global change to genomics. We are trees working to help us understand the effects of global change. We're home to the Harvard College Freshman Seminar Tree. We are educators dedicated to introducing urban school children to nature. We are a community committed to combating climate change. That's one of the largest solar arrays at Harvard, and that is the first native plant solar meadow in the Commonwealth. That is important to us. We are home to 16,000 curated woody plant accessions. That's a Coosa dogwood. You could buy one probably at Home Depot, but you can't buy that one. That tag tells me SD, seed, 1908, W, wild, China, E.H. Wilson. That means that Ernest Henry Wilson and his collecting team of both of Chinese colleagues and porters and medical people got a seed all the way out of China back there, and we've been taking care of that plant since 1908. It is not interchangeable with any other Coosa dogwood in the world, any more than we, as members of the same species, are interchangeable. This is part of standing. This is part of having a unique history, or what I would call provenance. We're home to the first dawn redwoods to grow in North America in 2 million years. And we are home to organisms with provenance like this dawn redwood that came out of China in 1947, arrived in 1948 with a collecting team. The plant was thought to be extinct. And then some of our colleagues in forestry in China discovered there was a small population. Here are the people who sent us the seeds. These are the very people who collected the seeds. Every 1948 dawn redwood at the Arboretum passed through their hands. That, I would argue, is provenance. And it starts with a seedling on the left of a dawn redwood, and 75 years later, something pretty wonderful comes out of that seed. We're home to winter flowering witch hazels. If you were, say, come to the Arboretum right now, you would see more things in flower than you can imagine. All of the witch hazels are there in flower. We're a place where lightning strikes, and I might say often. This was just a couple of years ago, just a little fun in the backyard. We're home to 8 Plant Conservation Network national collections. These mean like a museum collection of a kind of art. These are the finest collections of their kind in terms of the diversity and the provenance. Maples, hickories, you go on and on and on. Forsythia stewartia, ginkgo. We are home to 63 species of maple, New England has 4. We are safe harbor for species extinct in the wild. This is the Franklin tree, extinct in the wild. The 2 oldest specimens on the planet reside on Bussey Hill at the Arnold Arboretum. We are a force for conservation and fighting extinction around the world. The paperbark maple of China is under extreme threat. There's Michael Dosman, the keeper of the living collections, with our Chinese colleagues trying to get seeds that can go into botanical gardens for what's called ex situ conservation, locking down genetics and safety. We are an urban biodiversity hotspot. We know from a Harvard College thesis we have more than 70 species of native bees, 6 species of bats, and 188 species of birds that have been seen at the Arnold. We're home to the finest horticulturists and arborists in the world. We are a home for bonsais and bonsai masters. We are a place where plants are born. Every year we put in about 400 new specimens, all grown from seed from around the world. We are a group of intrepid plant explorers. This fall we were in Japan to get new threatened and endangered species into the Arnold and to delight everybody with the beauty of Japan's plants. We work with China every year, and we've been doing it for a long time. We were the first part of Harvard University to engage with China, and you can see a 3-year expedition of Ernest Henry Wilson. That was our headquarters. The Harvard was the boat name. 3 years of sending plant material back to Boston because we were in love with the plants of Asia. Now, why would we go to Asia so often? There are twice as many woody plant species of the temperate world in Asia compared to North America. And we have twice as many as Europe, so we never go to Europe. And I just wanted to show you quickly, that's then, but now we invite our Chinese colleagues to come collect North American material for Chinese botanical gardens and research institutions. So this was a wonderful Appalachian expedition in 2019 with some of our closest friends. We were one of the only botanical gardens or arboreta worldwide to remain open throughout the pandemic. And I turned to my colleagues in the School of Public Health, and you can see Joe Allen and Mark Lipsitch, who were the experts you saw on TV, and I said, can we do this? And they said, you can. And we put out our manifesto in the Washington Post about keeping parks open. We did not close for 1 minute. The New York Times Sunday editorial board saw what we were doing at the Arnold Arboretum in Boston and turned to the city of New York to say, you should be able to do this too. Now, why did I decide to keep this open when every other garden pretty much closed? We're not an amenity. We are part of the healthcare system of Boston. These are just a few of the studies in the literature talking about what happens when you spend regular time in a place like the Arnold Arboretum. Parks are not amenities. They are central to health and well-being of the citizenry. And that's why in a crisis like a pandemic, you do not close for a minute. You figure out how to do it. And since the pandemic began, millions of people have gotten their health and their happiness from the Arnold Arboretum. We are hosts to the vibrant human diversity of Boston. We are an institution committed to environmental justice. This is an entrance now that is being rebuilt, first new entrance in over 100 years by the city of Boston in parks. This is what it will look like this fall. This is an environmental justice community on the other side with public housing, and we cannot wait to welcome our neighbors into the Arnold Arboretum for the next 1900 years. We are an agent of democracy, free and open to all every day. And you bump into everybody on Lilac Sunday. And here is the mayor from the previous administration, Kim Janey, with her mother, and her mother holding her mother's photograph with her daughter and granddaughter. 5 generations just being together as mothers and women on Lilac Sunday, which has been going on since 1908. We are a place of joy. I was wandering by one day with the cherry blossoms. This is what I saw. We are a place where dove trees lift our souls. We're a place where friendships thrive, a place where families thrive, a place where love thrives. And we are a place of immense beauty. So, I want to switch a little bit and talk about my obsessions. Now, normally people think of obsessions as something that's not good, but I want you to see a way in which you can be obsessed that is healthy. So let me start with a quote from Goethe. an Italian journey. To wander about among a vegetation which is new to one is pleasant and instructive. It is the same with familiar objects. In the end, we cease to think about them at all. What is seeing without thinking? And I would argue that so often we all walk through the world of plants. They're under our feet, they're on our campuses, they're on our streets, and we do not see these organisms. But what I like to do is obsess about plants in the Arboretum. And I'm going to share just 2 of my obsessions, and then I will promise you that if you ever want to hear about more of them, I have plenty more. But these are annual rites for me. These are things I have to do, and they are things that change who I am because I am being shaped by the plants. Now, I work at the Arboretum every day. I live 2 blocks from the Arboretum, and I have a pocket camera. And to this point, I have been walking and photographing, and I've taken pictures of almost 3,000 of our 16,000 organisms. I will never get through them all. But if you want to see more of my images, all of them have been posted to our website. That's over 14,000. All of them have accession information. They can be used for teaching, and there's a button that drops them into a PowerPoint. So for GSD students who need projects with images of our plants, there are about 20,000 of them with the other people in there. So this is what that website looks like. These are just a few of my recent images. But let's talk about what you all could see this winter. If you said to yourself, maybe I should get out to the Arboretum, I'll go in the spring, don't wait. That's ridiculous. Winter is when you want to go. So I'm going to talk about bark, and smooth bark in particular. It is something you have to see. And one of my favorite kinds of smooth bark comes from a maple tree, and a kind of maple tree called snake bark maples. And you can see the skin of this tree looks like it might be snake skin with the white waxes and the ripples. And this is actually the Manchurian snake bark maple from Asia. It's beautiful and green, but you know what? It isn't always. Sometimes it's tangerine. Here's another snake bark maple species, doesn't have a common name, that's really almost an orange. And this last month, the red vein maple, a snake bark maple with the beautiful diamonds and the deep green and the furrowing, it seems like, of the waxes. There's only one species of snake bark maple that's native to the United States, and that's the moosewood maple. And there it is with all of those beautiful, beautiful waxes. But you can see, just staring at the bark, you get a sense of how they might be related. And then, this is not a snake bark maple, but it is the paper bark maple, one of the most beautiful barks you can imagine. And it is smooth, but as it feels in the fringes in the winter with the low light, the edges of a tree in the afternoon will look like they're on fire. There'll be a fringe of fire up and down the trunk. And then you can wander over to the birch collection to see the beautiful white Himalayan birch and those beautiful oblong streaks that are actually aeration structures for the tree to actually take in oxygen. Or walk over to the downy birch, which doesn't seem to have those structures, and a little bit more cream in the mix. Or the Asian black birch with the beautiful stripes and the little bit of sort of almost crater-like structure there. The paper birch, the Korean birch exfoliating and revealing a new layer of bark below. The Dahurian birch, which almost seems like it's impossible to imagine how many layers are there. And then one day I'm walking with my wife, a professor of botany naturally, and I look off in the distance in the snow, and there is a giraffe in the Arboretum, the Chinese Zelkova. It's only orange in the winter. All of these colors are intensified in the winter with the leaves off the tree. And if you come in the summer, you won't see it. You have to come now. Or the sawleaf Zelkova. And truly one of my favorites, the pine that I have fallen in love with the very first day of the Arboretum experience for me, the lacebark pine from China, Pinus bungiana. You might think pine barks are sort of dark brown and rippled. Not this one. It's reds, it's silvers, it's greens. Sometimes it throws orange. And when it exfoliates, as it is right now, puzzle pieces fall to the ground at the base of the trunk. And revealed below the old patina of red bark is the new patina, or lack thereof, of yellow bark. Imagine seeing that. All you have to do is come to the Arboretum and stand next to that tree. Or wander over to the stewardias, which are, again, a group both in Asia and in America. They have wonderful smooth bark. Or this one, the tall stewardia, almost crocodilian or reptilian with all of the little dots on it. And one of my favorite, the Korean stewardia, just now, I took this, I think 2 weeks ago, you can see the old pieces falling off. It's happening now. And they're scattered like little offerings around the base of the tree. And then you look at this one, this is by Center Street Gate. Now I'm going to give you some context. Imagine standing at this tree and looking up. If you're missing this, you're missing a lot. And this Chinese stewardia, a beautiful cocoa in the winter, going to chocolate brown in the summer, and you stand back, and the magnificent architecture reveals itself. So that's one of my obsessions. It's going around and looking at bark. I have nothing against rough and fissured bark, but smooth bark is a little bit more photogenic. Now, I want to take you to something that marks my beginning of spring. It's not a calendar event, it's a tree event. And it has to do with cones. And if you conjure up a conifer cone, you will conjure up a pine cone, perhaps, that's brown, large, and you might think of a spruce cone. But how many can you imagine what a cone looks like when it first is born and emerges from a bud? It's rather surprising. So this is my springtime set of obsessions, finding the perfect young conifer cone. An ovulate means it's the female cone that will produce the seeds. So you might say, I know a pine cone when I see it, and this is a table mountain pine. Actually, it's one of these serotinous pines that has to have fire to release its seeds, but it looks very woody and hard, and it is. Here's a larch cone, again, ready to shed its seeds. This is a European larch. But what did this cone look like in the spring when the buds broke? They were red, but just for a week, and then it's gone. This is ephemera. It goes around in yearly cycles, but everything you look at the Arboretum is part of this unfolding set of ephemera. And a European larch is spectacular. The first larch typically to open, and I'll show you in a minute, but look at this just quickly. No two trees are the same. The first one was bright red. This is another member of the same species, and it just has a fringe of pink. But it's the Siberian larch that starts off the spring, and it comes out pink. And this will start in the last week of March and the first week of April. They're about a half an inch. You can bring a hand lens, but in fact, you have been walking by these all your life. And now, once you have eyes to see, you can't walk by them ever again. Here's the Japanese larch. And then the next thing, it sort of goes in an order, is Douglas fir. Incredible. These are about 1.5 inch tall cones. They come out, and if you wait a couple of weeks, it's all over. There is something urgent about going and walking in the Arboretum. You say, I'll go next month, you're missing something you won't get to see. Here's a Wilson spruce cone at maturity. Here it is being born with the bud scales still tucked on the top as a cap. And the Yedo spruce, one of my favorites. It's a small tree, so you can walk up and you'll see it's like a candelabra of 150, 200, 300 cones. It's just phenomenal. And this magnificent spruce from China, light up in the sun, it literally glows. And then the common Norway spruce. Well, it does unusual things. It throws yellows. Sometimes it throws yellows and pinks. And sometimes some of our trees just throw Norway spruce red cones. But they are spectacular, they are architectural, they are sculptural. They're really something. I can't get through the spring without doing this on a regular basis. And then the dragon spruce, Picea aspirata. And finally, I want you to know there are some spruces that aren't red. And this tiger tail spruce, which rounds things up, is a beautiful green with a touch of orange. So I have many obsessions. I've just shared 2. I don't want to go on too long, but obsessing about nature is a really important practice. Take the time to get to know nature. In my class tree, each student has to pick one tree at the Arnold Arboretum, and each week they have to go and observe it. There are no instructions, but they have to write, photograph, draw, compose, poetry, whatever it is. And at first they say, I've done it once, what can I see again? And then they start to realize the tree will continue to reveal through time and through their eye becoming practiced. It's as simple as looking at a tree every week. You can do this in your backyards, you can do it on a street corner, but it will change you if you do it. So, let me go back to Aristotle. I like the old folks. In his Problematica, he wrote, "Why is it that an eclipse of the sun, if one looks at it through a sieve or through leaves, such as a plane tree or other broadleaf tree, or if one joins the fingers of one hand over the fingers of the other, the rays are crescent-shaped where they reach the earth?" Well, what he was writing about, of course, is a solar eclipse and standing under a tree. So the last solar eclipse in Boston was in 2017, and this 2-hour period will go down as probably the last memory I hold before I depart. There is a magnificent tree. This is a European beech, but it's a mutant form of European beech called the tortuosa beech. This is a natural mutation in the wild. They grow in the understory of European beech trees, and this is from France. It was collected in France and sent to Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, and in 1888, Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew shipped it to us. And we've been taking care of this magnificent organism that was dug up in the wild from France for a very long time. Now, I chose this one for a number of reasons. Beeches have smooth bark, it's low, and what really was going on in Aristotle, even if you didn't know it, is leaves, when they flutter in the slightest breeze, create hundreds of pinhole cameras. So I went there while everyone had their cereal box or their spaghetti sieve, and I stood under this tree for 2 hours. Just me, this wonderful mutant form of European beech, the moon off at some distance, and the sun 93 million miles away. And this is what I saw. I saw the moon carve out the sun on the beautiful bark of this old and venerable beech. I watched the moon rotate through counterclockwise and carve the sun. No one bothered me, no one saw me under this tree. I had 2 hours to be connected to the earth, to this tree, to the universe. This is something I will never forget, and it is a reminder that nature can shape your lives in ways that are profound. So let me conclude with 2 things that I think are important to say. Carson McCullers, the great American author, a short story called A Tree, a Rock, a Cloud. And I recommend everyone read it. It's about a vagrant coming through town talking to a small boy in a breakfast cafe. "Son, do you know how love should be begun?" The boy sat small and listening and still. Slowly he shook his head. The old man leaned closer and whispered, "A tree, a rock, a cloud." Meaning that if you can get to the point where you can love these objects, this nature, something that can't love you back, it is unreciprocated love we're talking about here, then you will be ready to love other humans. And I will finish with Thoreau. "Old trees are our parents, and our parents' parents, perchance. If you would learn the secrets of nature, you must practice more humanity." I believe trees in the city, trees in the Arboretum, us helping everyone connect with trees, can make us all more loving, more empathetic, and better people. I believe that with all my heart.
Is anyone not convinced? Is everybody going to the Arboretum on Saturday? You better be ready for a crowd. Thank you, Ned. Most inspiring, really. A botanist with humanist obsessions. That's fantastic. I want to say two brief things before we ask Mayor Wu to come up and give some remarks. I want to say a word about Professor Ed Eigen, who is a senior lecturer in the history of landscape architecture and architecture here at GSD, and the current head of the narratives domain of the Master of Design Studies program. He works a lot here. I've said this before, in fact, many times, but every encounter with Ed is a memorable one. You learn at least a new term every time. And every question, every statement, every utterance in a faculty meeting rings for me with Dr. Eigen. Ed will offer a brief commentary on the pairing of Ned's talk and Mayor Wu's commentary. And now for Mayor Wu. To those who care about the health of our urban forest and its ecosystems, and those who also care about the just delivery of environmental services and benefits to the underserved in our communities, Mayor Wu is no stranger to you. She's working hard on these and other important matters, including carbon drawdown, prison reform, education. There are so many things. She's also a big fan and a dedicated user of Franklin Park. I've heard her speak devotedly on the legacy of Frederick Law Olmsted and his firm that has been bestowed upon Boston, which is unequaled anywhere. And she's also working with devotion, I think, to reverse years of decline and neglect in our park system. We all know this, which, in spite of a long, unfortunate period, still serves vast populations every day of neighbors and visitors. Mayor Wu has proven first as a city councilor and more forcefully in her time as mayor. It's only been a little bit of time, we hope it's a really long time, that the twin crises of climate risk and environmental justice directly shape many of the actions and priorities for the city of Boston. It's fantastic. Mayor Wu, it's our great honor to welcome you to the GSD, and we hope you'll be a frequent visitor.
Good evening, everyone. It is a delight and a deep and humbling honor to be able to be here. Thank you so much, Gary, for the invitation and for your counsel and wisdom and that of your entire team already having shaped so much of how we're thinking about Franklin Park through our action plan and even in the conversations now and to come. Thank you to all who have taken the time to engage on this very important set of conversations tonight and into tomorrow. And I'm sure I'm not the only one in the room who still has some goosebumps from Ned's talk. It is a treasure to be able to hear all that you have, to hear what's in your heart about our world, our city, our arboretum, and our trees, most of all. Thank you. We are absolutely delighted that you are where you are, and I'm actually quite thrilled that you get both sides of that 1,000-year handshake here tonight with you. New meeting, as I don't have, English is not my first language, so I don't always get idioms and things right, but I was in my head, especially at the end of the talk, thinking about what it means to sell the bark off of a tree or something like that, that we can focus on. Well, I'm here, I suppose, in my capacity as mayor of Boston. But before I was mayor, before I was a mom, before I was a city councilor, before I dreamed of anything about what my adult life would look like, I was a tree hugger, first and foremost in my life. So we share some similar obsessions, I believe. And I grew up in a family of quite specific traditions. My parents had immigrated from Taiwan to the US before I was born, and I'm the oldest of 4 kids in our immigrant family. My parents themselves were children of immigrants from mainland China to Taiwan in the midst of war, and so in some ways, preserving and protecting culture was so very important to my family. And that meant that I grew up worshiping my parents, right? It was very much a paradigm of the kids, you respect your elders, you always listen, never speak out of turn, etc. Until one moment when that collided with my tree-hugging obsession. I must have been in first grade, so about 6 years old, the same age as my younger son now, and I woke up to the sound of a loud buzzing, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Ran downstairs, and eventually my mom told me that it was the sound of a tree being cut down in the neighborhood. I was extremely alarmed and wanted to find out more of what had happened, and she shared with me that my dad, who is a big kind of do-it-yourself home fixer kind of guy, has every tool set of everything, had run into our neighbor, earlier in the week, who shared that he had a problematic tree that needed to be taken care of, and my dad had let this neighbor borrow the chainsaw that he had to take care of it. I was so furious that I did not speak with my father for an entire 24-hour period for the betrayal of providing the tools to do something like that. Not knowing, any of the circumstances, it was enough to me that a beautiful natural creature in the world was being cut down. It was very personal for me at that moment because most of my free time, when I wasn't with my siblings, or sometimes even when I was spent hanging from the limbs of that one tree in our backyard. The place that was my sacred space where in a world of constantly navigating language barriers and culture shifts and switching back and forth, I was just me at home and at peace in the world. And it's a sentiment that I can already sense in my two boys too. I walk them to school from time to time at all seasons of the year. And the favorite part of our walk from our home in Roslindale to their school, about a 7-minute trip away, is a gigantic sycamore tree that is right along, bursting through the edge of the sidewalk on Poplar Street. It's so big that you can't put your arms all the way around it. It's been protected and has been the leading star in rallies to save it as the properties around it on all sides have been redeveloped. And when my kids and I walk by, I tell them that if they just give the tree a gentle high five, if they kind of place their hand on that smooth bark, the tree will feel how they are that day, where they're headed, and know that it's them. And that sense of connection, for me as a child growing up with the natural environment, for my kids as a little milestone and ritual in their beginning of their days, starts to get a little bit at the core of the importance of being able to place ourselves as creatures in a very wide world about much more than just ourselves and the daily business and what might be in front of us that day. It is, I believe, the reason why the agreement between the Arnold Arboretum and the City of Boston became so unique. It's fitting that a 1,000-year agreement was signed over trees. Not only the first time that Harvard gave something away for $1, but the first time that a politician, I would guess, signed an agreement much further than one election cycle or a couple. There's no other 1,000-year leases with a 1,000-year extension provision that I know of in the city of Boston and maybe anywhere else in the world. And that sense of longevity is tied to the feeling that trees help us understand the passage of time. That sycamore tree, as I talk to my kids when we walk to school, has seen the entire area change. All the many, many people and many lifetimes that it has witnessed. The 1,000-year agreement was necessary to be able to envision how the seedlings and saplings that were collected would one day become full specimens, and through all of the various steps in their journey and what that would teach us. And in some ways, it reminds us of our connection to each other as well. I am as you heard, a devotee of Olmsted, have done a bit of research as we've been thinking about changes to Franklin Park and understanding Franklin Park as maybe the premier example of the culmination of Olmsted's vision and practices towards the later part of his career. And what I enjoy most about Olmsted is not only his appreciation for the landscape architecture field and all that meant for the daily lives of real people. The idea that parks, as he envisioned it, were much more, maybe for the first time, supposed to be not just for a diversion for those who had wealth and resources and could pay to maintain a structure like that in their backyards or in their lovely gardens, but for people who did not have the resources, could maybe not rely on keeping food on the table every single day, that everyone deserves to have that sense of enjoyment, that connection to health and clean air, and sense of peace that being in nature brings us. But on top of all of that, Olmsted's big focus was on the idea of what he called communitivism, that parks uniquely create an opportunity for all of us to be in connection with each other. Communitivism, as I understand his philosophy, is about the practice of recognizing and caring about the lives of those around you, even if you don't have a direct personal relationship. Even if you might not know someone's name, that it matters to you how their day is going, how their lives are, and how their place in the world is connected to yours. We are in a moment in a world, when I look at any question about will something save us, of course, we think about the climate crisis and how urgent changes are. But I think in my world about the 2024 election. I think about where politics is in this moment and how hard it is to have faith in the institutions around us to be able to take action, in the collective expression of our connection to each other. Government, the one place where we're supposed to be able to do the big things that none of us can do on our own through the public sector, that the very idea of our democracy is on the line right now. And so if we talk about what do we need saving for and from and about, that sense of trust and connection that underpins our entire democracy, and whether we believe in the institution of democratic government at all, is on the line and is very much connected to the smooth bark and the spaces where people can come together with their neighbors from every walk of life, where they might not know their name, but they feel that same shared stake in place, in community, and eventually in each other's lives as well. And so for me, our work at the city level to build for the first time a real urban forestry team, to create a youth jobs program called our Power Corps program, which is designed to connect young people from Boston, from underrepresented backgrounds, with jobs in green infrastructure and in climate resiliency. That this is much more than just restoring and balancing our tree canopy. It's much more even than just cleaning our air and ensuring we're doing our part to absorb the floodwaters when they inevitably come. This work ultimately is about saving our connection to each other in a very fragile and divided time. There have been some studies done over many decades around the nature of trust, the nature of our interactions with people in close networks, and who people define at different moments over different decades as in their trusted circle. And it's pretty staggering what the shift has been right now compared to, say, 30 or 40 years ago. If you asked 30, 40 years ago, how often are people spending time with their neighbors who live on the same street as them, it was 3 times a week. On average, people would get together with their neighbors. Today, you look around, and especially in a college campus setting or in places in large auditoriums, if I asked how many people actually knew the names of every neighbor on their street, I'm not sure how many hands I would get actually held up in the air. There are many reasons for that. We have far less time because devices and the nature of work and the understanding of what it means to work a job, and also the pay scale for labor simply has not kept up, so that people are working longer hours than ever before, multiple jobs out of necessity and out of a sort of culture that we've established. But we also are communicating in ways that are much more siloed and disconnected from being exposed to wide viewpoints. The forest may be the last place where we are truly in community with everyone. And so this work is urgent for many reasons. We can measure and feel and touch many of them, and some of them, I believe, are even more fundamental than that, about the very nature of how we come together as human beings in a society, in a democracy. And I thank you all for your role in keeping that healthy.
Thank you, Mayor Wu. We really didn't plan the pairing, but what a pairing it was, and I think you have an incredibly receptive audience for the message you just shared. So thank you deeply. I'm going to ask Ed to start, because time is tight.
Thank you, Gary. I'll try to be brief about this. I am meant this evening to respond to Ned's talk, to which I will say in a word, amen. But since I have the unexpected privilege of sharing the podium with the Honorable Michelle Wu, I also want to say a brief word about the mayor. I refer here to Patrick Collins, Boston's 36th mayor, whose family emigrated to America in 1848, driven from their native Ireland by a phytological catastrophe, namely the potato famine caused by the pathogen Phytophthora infestans. But as historian William Coleman has taught us, death is a social disease, so why pin all the blame on that baleful sounding water mold? The seed thus sown has borne abundant fruit, Collins' biographer wrote of the Irish immigrant ships, but that fruit sprung from resistant soil. As a child, Collins suffered from a broken arm when a nativist mob descended on his Chelsea neighborhood and ransacked the Catholic Church where he was an altar boy. Collins left school at 12 to help support his family, working for a fish and oyster dealer, but soon came to the benevolent attention of one of the church's parishioners, Robert Morris. The only black lawyer then practicing in Boston, his clients mostly poor and working-class Irish, Morris hired Collins to be a clerk in his chambers, imbuing in him a lifelong reverence for due process. Following a stint at Harvard Law School, evidently not the same class as Mayor Wu, and 3 terms in Congress, Collins was elected mayor in December 1901, and according to my sources, his, quote, abstemious political practices contributed to Boston's reputation for good government and relatively clean politics. Okay. My present interest in Morris stems from his appearance in the 1928 annual report submitted by John Donnelly, Superintendent of Parks for Cambridge. After reviewing the city's ever-important work on shade trees, 3,600 young trees planted, 150 dead old trees removed, and its unending campaign against defoliating browntail and gypsy moths, life, death, and chemical biocide, all in a day's work, Donnelly turned to a special and arguably unique tree, the Washington elm. It was under this consecrated tree in Cambridge Common, James Russell Lowell wrote in his centennial poem, that George Washington assumed command of the Continental Army July 3, 1775. Well, Lowell also refers to it as a legendary tree, for there is absolutely no evidence that Washington ever stood beneath its monumental shade. No matter, in 1923, Charles Briggs Sargent, director of the Arnold Arboretum, sent a letter to the Cambridge mayor, then Cambridge mayor, Edward Quinn, stating that, quote, all signs of life have now gone from the Washington elm. To keep the tradition of the witness tree alive, in 1927, the Cambridge Park Board accepted an offer of cuttings from a son of the original Washington elm. A landscape historian at heart, Donnelly set about documenting the tree's genealogy through the work of Jackson Dawson of the Arnold Arboretum, who had cultivated a number of scions, quote, in the hope that they may prove worthy successors of the original tree. One of these cuttings was given to Mayor Collins, and it was this lineal descendant that was replanted in the Cambridge Commons in 1927. Alas, there's always family drama. Boy, do I know that. By 1931, the dendrologist John George Jack felt compelled to respond in the Arnold Arboretum's Bulletin of Popular Information to the large volume of mail and telephone inquiries he had received regarding so-called Washington elms. Many of these were prompted by the, quote, seductive advertisements of nurserymen offering plants propagated directly from the original tree. Even if that were the case arboreally, and it wasn't, Jack suggested that, quote, the anniversary of the 200th birthday of George Washington in 1932 could be much more fittingly, permanently, and usefully marked by the establishment of community forests rather than high-priced trees of doubtful history. And here I think of Mayor Wu's communitivism. So, about the mayor's remarks. And now I'm referring to Ned, for surely he is the mayor of the Arnold Arboretum, a rare community of trees and a precious community resource. But first, a bit of missing context. And for this, we need to visit one of Boston's official sister cities, which is Padua, Italy. It was there on September 27, 1787, while visiting its then already venerable botanical garden, that Goethe experienced a special insight into the metamorphosis of plants while noting the transitional leaf morphology of a fan palm. Some years later, he reflected on that moment, and here to quote Ned back to himself, to wander about a vegetation which is new is pleasant and instructive. It is the same with familiar plants as with familiar objects. In the end, we cease to think about them at all. And what is seeing without thinking? Well, no such thing for Ned's hero. Goethe saw the palm and threw the palm to the idea of an archetypal plant both hidden and revealed in its protean leaf. At the Padua Botanical Garden, the object of Goethe's transcendent gaze was never lost sight of. To be sure, a forest of trees had been felled to publish all the scholarly commentary on what Goethe perceived that day with the eye of the mind, or as he called it, das Auge des Geistes. But what I wish to remark upon here is the care given by the garden's keepers, not only in nurturing the Goethe palm, as it came to be known, but also in perpetuating Goethe's singular act of thinking, seeing. In 1874, the garden's director, Roberto Viziani, built at his own expense a glass house to protect this testimony tree and installed a plaque inscribed as follows: Giovanni Wolfgango Goethe, which I love, poet and naturalist, here in 1787 derived the concept and evidence for his Metamorphosis of Plants of 1790. And Roberto Viziani, so that the palm that inspired is not forgotten to posterity, in 1874 safeguarded its glorious antiquity. So now to the present. Ned expresses concern about facsimiles of nature, which have disconnected us from actual nature. And one could argue that seductively advertised cuttings of dubiously historical trees qualify in this regard. Ned also speaks in his writings of an age of environmental destruction, for it is the caretakers who make us mindful of life stages not anticipated by the natural metamorphosis of plants, that sacred mystery sensed by Goethe, and these keepers who in their arboreta and botanical gardens possess a sociable cure. As it happens, Goethe gives us the word environment by way of Thomas Carlyle's translation of Umgebung. While perpetuating the still unfolding thought event of Goethe's thinking eye vision, Viziani's inscription finally speaks to the nominal theme of this conference, the future. It shall not be forgotten to posterity. What might the future look like, or rather sound like? Must we end on a baleful note? Listen to Goethe's Wanderer's Night Song, and there is that attentive and expectant wanderer again. A poem legendarily written in the forests of Ettersberg under a tree that came to be known as the Goethe oak. Over all mountaintops is peace. In all treetops you sense barely a breath. The little birds are silent in the woods. Just wait, soon you will rest too. That's Longfellow's translation. So, despite all present signs to the contrary, this perhaps is what the future holds. If we act now to still the stirrings of destruction, peace comes. So, to my two mayors, when it beckons, may you give it the freedom of a well and truly canopied city, ushering in a Green New Deal. Amen. So thanks for your patience. Been on mute so long. Just pick up on something the mayor said about taking the bark off the tree and Gary's comment about my love of words. But the term codex for the books we read comes from codex, the Latin word for a bark of a tree. And it strikes me how legible it just, Ned makes these things, which again, they fleeting. They're lost to us. And unless we're cultivated in that form of attentiveness, which I'm incredibly grateful. Also, my main comment just to start, and here to pick up again on Mayor Wu's comment about what's in the heart. And I'd rather address that first before getting on to questions of obsession, which might get a bit touchy. But the love of trees that we so strongly recognize in Ned, and he communicates to us. I think of texts like Erasmus Darwin's The Love Life of Plants, which is a meditation on Linnaeus' sexual system, at times quite bawdy, but it's an introduction into plant reproduction, leaving out, of course, cryptogamous plants, those of hidden marriage bed. But what Ned is instructing us on is another form of love, our love for plants, and the difficulty there, and as he said, that it's potentially non-reciprocated, and then what kind of investment or involvement do we have to have to sustain that love, that botanophilia, if you want to call it that. The one term I'd add to that, and I see this so present in Ned's comments and the mayor's comments, is to add the term kindness, to put loving kindness, and that kind of practice of caregiving for which Ned attends at the Arboretum, the mayor attends to our city at large, to make sure that all are both kin and to all we are kind, and we cultivate that sensibility. And it might well be, as Rousseau told us, Emile's garden, the Arnold Arboretum might be the finest, in the city of Boston, might be the finest classroom we have for those loving lessons. So I'll maybe begin by just addressing the question of love.
Well, happy Valentine's Day to everyone yesterday. I think, okay, so the first place that my mind went as Professor Eigen was teeing up this question was around how we, and a little bit as Ned was talking about the care and the kind of relationship that you benefit from in recognizing the quickly changing nature, the ephemera of the world around you and the specific creatures or trees or specimens around you. Imagine if we all treated each human being in our life that way as well, right? The same person on this day versus that day versus that day. That the how are you and how you do is actually a real deepening connection. And we're in a moment in our world where, again, at the national political level especially, whether someone qualifies as a human being you check in with and care enough to care that they have shelter and food and the basics is very much triggered by the conversation around the migrant crisis and newly arrived families in every city around the country. We are, dig a little deeper in that conversation, and you get to the roots of why there are such shifting migration and refugee patterns around the world anyway, which is, again, the nature of who has access to water in a quickly changing environment, where there are access to land that is still usable for food production. And we know that we are already at or past the point where this is going to accelerate, and therefore these issues of how people come together and who we recognize and let into our communities and how we build those bonds or not ultimately is back to how we have treated the natural world around us and what parts of the world are now habitable for humans to build those bonds and build those communities. So I think in this moment in 2024, as we're talking about trees and forests and love, for me, this is, we're at a little bit of an existential decision point for our entire planet on what it means to recognize a certain baseline of what every human deserves and how that changes as the world itself is changing very quickly.
So I agree with everything you said, and I think that comes back to why public green spaces are so important. It's where we come out of our bubbles. Since I started working as the director of the Arnold Arboretum, I have a golf cart, only professor at Harvard with a golf cart, just in case you want to know. I lord it over everyone in the business school. And it isn't easy for them. But the fact is, I zip around, I walk around. I have made it my practice every time I pass any human being and make eye contact to wave. I've done this now for 13 years. It's a small act of rebellion against the isolation that the mayor has referred to at a national level, but also at that very local street level. Making eye contact matters. I don't have to know you, I have to acknowledge you. And when you do this in cities where there is diversity, I may not speak the same language. It matters that I wave. These spaces, if we incorporate these cultural practices, and it is something we have to work at, the crew, the staff at the Arboretum, they do the same things. It is a day-by-day thing to break down our natural resistance to leaving our pocket of the world. And that's why these spaces, like Franklin Park and the rest of the Emerald Necklace and many of the pocket parks, they are one of our only ways of getting outside of our little base of people we know. So this is tremendously important. And when I come back to, this idea of unreciprocated love, I think it's I will just be honest with everyone, there are a lot of books that talk about how plants are helping each other and feeding each other carbon through mycorrhizal associations. There's not much evidence for that. But I also worry to a very great extent that we are trying to make the trees into a better version of ourselves, instead of accepting the trees for the best version of what they are. So for me, it's really important that that tree not be me reflected back at me. So I have a personal stake in this idea of demystifying trees, but this is where it becomes unreciprocated. That tree can't feel anything for me, but it can change my life. What a profound thing to understand. And it can be any tree.
Okay, so in the middle of this love fest, where everyone seems to be in complete agreement, I think there might be a difference of opinion on something. So you put your boy's hand on the tree, and you are imparting on them the idea that the tree senses it. It's a sentient being. Ned doesn't think so.
But there's an important distinction. Discuss. So
I want my $1 back.
I'll take care of it.
Show me the money.
No, this is wonderful. The ability to tell stories about the natural world is deeply important. Charles Darwin, who was the person who began to understand how inhospitable the world is, the process of natural selection, literally slaying 99.9%. He anthropomorphized everything. He gave names to his barnacles, he gave names to his insects. There was Mr. Arthrobalanus. His children absorbed that love. That's love. But what I wouldn't want us to do is, as adults, begin to make these trees, when we have such an important role to play in their survival, a reflection of us. So no, you can tell all the wonderful stories, and it is a beautiful thing if your son thinks that tree is acknowledging him. There's nothing wrong with that. If he has a name for it, that's a great thing. But you can have both in your mind at the same time. But I think there is a danger for the adults, for us, to make plants somehow sentient and human. They're not. They're beautiful without being human. And that, I think, is so important. If anything has no value because it's not human, we're screwed.
And as you say, it is maybe the utmost of human empathy to give forth unbending love without it being requited.
And in some ways it is, from a parenting perspective, since somehow we ended up on love and childbearing and all that here, I think about, I forget I'm trying to remember the name of the book. There's a book about a raccoon family. I think it's called The Kissing Hand or something like that. Has anyone heard of that? And the idea is that the little baby raccoon is really scared to go to school. And so I think they were raccoons. Maybe I'm just thinking about Franklin Park too much these days. In addition to the bear cages that used to be in existence, there was this raccoon cage structure that was part of the original zoo before it became a zoo. But I think they were raccoons in this book. And the mama raccoon tells the baby, give me your hand. She kisses it, and then she says, every time you think of me or need me, my kiss is going to stay on your hand. And you just put it on your cheek, and I'm there with you, right? So same thing, right? If the kiss is not, of course, on the hand, and it gets washed and this and that. But the idea of creating markers in the natural world or in your daily life through different moments or routines or anchors to give you a chance to, in some ways, check in with yourself, right? How are you feeling that day when you put your hand on this tree? How are you feeling when you realize that you could use your mom's love in that moment, even though she's not necessarily there with you? I think that is the power of nature and art and the things beyond our daily focus, all the things that we have to take off for our jobs and the, making money or buying groceries or taking care of this or that, all the many, many things that take up most of our energy and mind and thought. In fact, there's something much more instinctual and human below all of that only the natural world and this kind of extraordinary connection can provide.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, we are going to go to the next step. Mayor Wu has somewhere else to be as well. Thanks to both our mayors. Thank you, Ed, for always being the best provocateur in anywhere. And I hope we can do this again.
It's been such a delight. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for having us.
Don't leave. Well, that was great. Is everyone in a good mood? Yeah. We have just a couple more things, and then we can take our parched selves out into the hall and raise a glass. Now it's time to introduce Anita Berrizbeitia. Anita has been professor of landscape architecture here since 2009. She served as the chair of the Department of Landscape Architecture from 2015 until just 2 years ago. An amazing chair who brought us through the crisis of the pandemic, still intellectually intact and ready to continue to work. Prior to that, she served as program director, and now, after her well-deserved sabbatical, she's back teaching full-time, and we're incredibly glad for that. Anita's pursuit of the forest goes back a long ways. Her influential essay, The Amsterdam Bos, The Modern Public Park, and the Construction of the Collective Experience from 1999 offered scholars and practitioners a deliberate and critical reading of the Urban Forest Project as a work of both ecological function and of social infrastructure. In 2019, she curated with the Swiss landscape architect Günter Vogt an exhibition entitled First the Forest, and we'll talk a little bit about that again tomorrow. Recently, we heard her magnificent lecture on the work of Charles Eliot in trying to restore forests in the Blue Hills Reservation. Such important work and a remarkable piece of scholarship. And now, this seminar, which produced the work outside in the gallery, for which we are all immensely grateful. I'd like to have Anita come up to the stage, and I'd also like to have the students in the seminar be recognized, if you'll stand. Manuel, the teaching fellow, also please stand. The idea that you could come back from your break and do this and teach studios, it's remarkable. So thank you so much. And please come and give us a little tour. I'll just stand here.
Okay, remind me how this works. Okay, right over there. All right. What did I do? Okay. Well, thank you, Gary, for that. I want to say that it was an extraordinary, it's a hard act to follow. Ned, with your obsessions, and forests are one of mine. And for the conversation that came out of all of this, it was really quite inspiring and remarkable. And then to Ed and Gary for their brilliant comments. So a warm welcome to the official opening of Forest Futures. And I start with this image of the exhibition banner in the facade of Gant Hall because it marks the moment when something that begins in the classroom turns into a public event and conversation. And for that, I want to thank Sarah Whiting, the Dean of the school, Gary Hilderbrand, and also Ken Stewart, Assistant Dean and Director of Communications, because without this kind of leadership and support, these occasions that integrate us with the world outside are not possible and need to happen much more. From a distance, forests appear to be remarkably similar. They are ecosystems characterized by the dominance of trees. They provide habitat for species of flora and fauna. They provide shelter and resources for humans, and are key agents in climate mitigation and adaptation. Yet, at the same time, they are all unique. And their distinctiveness is what drew our attention to them as the subject of study in my seminar last fall, and what continued as the core idea for our exhibition. As designed environments, they are both infinitely complex and, from a human perspective, experientially powerful. If you've been on a walk in a forest on any day, you are changed. And you know something happened to your life that day. And it is that duality between the rational and the emotional that we wanted to deliver in the exhibition. So thank you again to the students who participated in the seminar. And also thank you to Dan Borelli. Are you here? Dan? Yes. Okay. And to Manuel, who was the research associate and exhibition of the designer. A few weeks ago, as we rushed to complete the installation, Dan described that Forest Futures as a maximalist show with 500 objects. I didn't know whether he was upset at us or was enjoying it. And I tested him about this, and I said, well, give me the metrics. And it turns out there are more than 800. So a special thanks to you, Dan, and to your team for the dedication you put into this exhibition, but also for all of your suggestions and expertise, because they made a huge difference, and the show is beautiful. So I'm not going to talk about how all of these pieces are organized, but very pragmatically, I will just walk you through the plan of the exhibit. On the north wall, let's see, does this work? So, starting here. On the north wall, we have a visual glossary of 72 terms related to forests and trees. This was actually our second assignment in the seminar, an immersive exercise that gave us a common language to begin to describe the enormity of our subject matter. Landscape architecture faculty research is located on the two walls that flank the north half, let's say, of the gallery. 7 armatures occupy the center of the space and contain a display of designed forests in urban environments. The very large wall in the middle of the gallery has forest cartographies at the global and continental scales, a video installation right outside the Piper wall right here, explores who labors on behalf of forests, and finally, towards the Cambridge Street entrance, are the exquisite photographs of New York artist Stanley Greenberg and a collective video by 18 colleagues from around the world who shared their forest experiences. So within this general distribution, I'll say that the exhibition weaves together multiple storylines that reflect the ideas explored in the seminar. I will point out some of these themes and connections between them, although our intention is that you find the ideas much as you would in a forest, in an aleatory manner as you ramble around the gallery. Nevertheless, there are some thematic adjacencies and distributions that are worth noting. So as you enter the gallery, global forest change underscores the distribution of forest biomes on the planet, and at the same time, they call our attention to the 4 primary drivers of forest loss: logging, agriculture, grazing, and fire. Most alarming is the rate of deforestation in the tropical forest, the equivalent of 27 soccer fields that vanish every minute. At either side of the global forest map is a comprehensive view of the forests of North America compiled for the 10th census of the United States between 1880 and 1884. Charles Sprague Sargent, the first director of the Arnold Arboretum, was commissioned to do this report. The maps are great examples of biodiversity, biogeography at work. They map out literally how forests relate to topography and hydrological networks and why they exist where they are. Of particular interest is the last in the series of 16 maps, which is intended to show the productive capacity of American forests. So this is for a census. They want to know how much we had in wealth. But in doing so, it also shows us the great extent of deforestation that had already occurred in 1880, because the legend in this map is about the loss of density. The narrative of land degradation in Sargent's last map connects with the first piece in the faculty research wall. So my own piece on Charles Elliott's work at the Blue Hills Reservation, an early example of forest restoration after 250 years of extractive practices and devastating fires that had destroyed the forest in the hills surrounding Boston. Elliott was able to do this work because of the introduction of new technologies, such as photography, better surveying techniques and equipment, and the introduction of photolithography. New technologies that measure, visualize, represent, or negotiate forested spaces thread through the wide-ranging research of the faculty in our department. Here on the top image, for instance, you see Danielle Choi's and Mark Heller's recent fieldwork, which combines GIS, drones for in situ data collection, and on-the-ground fieldwork to identify healthy and distressed plant life. Light detection and ranging, also known as LiDAR, a remote sensing method, was critical for mapping in detail the forest edges on the clearings in this forest outside Oslo, such that the community members could really make decisions, informed decisions on the shape and size of these clearings. Technology is present throughout the exhibition, especially in the armatures, where we see measurements of heat islands and of shade equity in urban environments becoming a new standard of practice in landscape architecture. As you walk out of the cafeteria, a manipulated LiDAR scan of the canopy of the Congo River rainforest beautifully captures the ethereal qualities of forest canopies. In opposition to, but equally important to these high-tech representations, are the many forms of traditional indigenous knowledge that are increasingly relevant today in the management of forests and their use as social and community spaces. The visual glossary on the north wall gathers 72 terms in 12 topics, showing how human societies have known and manipulated trees throughout history. The glossary includes a broad variety of topics, from tree biology to indigenous knowledge to techniques of tree transplantation and agroforestry. The glossary is shared via printed cards that you are welcome to take with you and begin your journey into this fascinating topic. The spine of armatures, the main protagonists in the exhibition, contains different aspects of the urban forest. They were designed by Manuel Busas. They are made of 37 Douglas fir armatures and 69 fir and plywood panels, onto which are attached the images. The modular units can be combined into many configurations. We have armatures with 5 sides and armatures with 4 sides, and they together hold 106 images and 2 video screens. In the panels, you will see modern and contemporary projects of urban forests from around the world. They range in size from tiny forests, such as the 2,400 square foot Paley Park in New York City, to King Salman Park in Riyadh at 4,000 acres. And about 35 design firms are represented here. Each armature focuses on one topic, and the sequence engages work displayed nearby on the walls. They begin with a focus on technique, complementing the visual glossary, and thereafter are grouped by typology, so street trees, forest parks, urban groves, master plans, canopy equity, and citizen foresters, which underscores the work communities contribute to the planting and upkeep of street trees in their neighborhoods. Thus, the armatures take us from technique through design to people. Landscape architecture. The topic of individuals and communities in the forest is a focus of People in the Forest, a video installation that tells us that, and I quote one of the beautiful sentences the students wrote, "Today's forest grows from an understory of labor. From foresters, firefighters, and landowners to acts of protection, indigenous care, maintenance, and production, communities work in the forest." And I would also like to point out Professor Eigen's and Lisa Hibbert-Thompson's admonition back in the faculty wall, through the voice of Dick Turpin and the history of London's Epping Forest, that people do belong in the forest. The exhibition also includes 28 black and white photographs by New York artist Stanley Greenberg. 25 of these are from his book Olmsted Trees, which documents trees planted in the 19th century for Olmsted's original park designs that are still alive today. And additional photographs titled Coronavirus Shelters show rustic structures that were built by neighbors of Prospect Park in New York at the beginning of the pandemic, and they were created impromptu to provide play space for children when public playgrounds had been closed. These are extraordinary actions of love, I would say. And finally, we end with Forests from Around the World, a collective video installation that invites us to see fragments of experiences inside forests in 18 locations around the world. Here, the focus is on the immersive potential of the forest as a space of intimate connection with nature. This video is about 6 minutes long, and I encourage you to really see through it. So to end, some few takeaways from the exhibition. Forests of the future will be designed environments, by which I mean planted, taken care of, and managed with intentionality. They will not just happen or persist on their own. We will know multiple ways of working with forests. The future of the forest is both ancestral and high-tech. Ancestral wisdom shows us a way forward, and modern technology is key to understanding larger patterns, change over time, and other forest characteristics we would not be able to acquire otherwise. Crucially, it reveals vulnerabilities in urban neighborhoods by detecting canopy inequities in underserved areas of our city, as Gary's project for Cambridge has shown, and Chris Reed's for Boston as well. As designed environments, forests of the future will emerge from a combination of natural regeneration, conservation, and silvicultural management. However, the urban forest will require advanced techniques for the support of trees throughout their life. This will require financial commitments from municipalities, but these will more than pay off with comfort, health, equity, and community engagement, all of which will lead to healthier and more prosperous cities and people. So the future of the forest will depend as much on us as our own survival will depend on theirs. Thank you very much for coming tonight, and please join us for a reception in the gallery.